Welcome to Chamber Champions. I'm Derek Miller with the Salt Lake Chamber, Utah's voice for business. Each week, we take the opportunity to speak with leaders from business, government, education, and community service organizations who are making a difference in Utah. As a Chamber Champion, these individuals are recognized for their contributions and provided a forum to empower their vision and objectives. Today, we're joined by Pat Jones, CEO of the Women's Leadership Institute. Pat, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Derek.
I can't think of a better way to celebrate Women's History Month than to talk to the leader of the Women's Leadership Institute. And for those who are watching this that may not know what your organization does, maybe we'll just start there. Why don't you give us the overview?
The Women's Leadership Institute was organized in January of 2015 to elevate the stature of women's leadership in business and in politics. Utah at that time had historically some issues recruiting talent here because of how the outside world viewed and continues sometimes to view women here in the state of Utah.
And are we doing better since 2015?
The awareness level is definitely going up. I think there's a lot of interest in how to elevate the stature of women's leadership in the state of Utah. And so there's an energy here now.
Well, I'm really proud of the fact that your organization, the Women's Leadership Institute, and my organization, the Salt Lake Chamber, are co-located together. I think it's a great mutually beneficial relationship that we have, and we certainly see the need that has been heightened even through the pandemic to have more leaders, both elected, as you mentioned, as well as in the business community. One of the things where I was first introduced to the work that you do prior to me coming to the chamber was through the pledge that you ask organizations to take. Tell us about that.
Yes, I would say one of the most important things we do is help people understand the value of gender diversity. And in order to do that, we have the Elevate Her Challenge, which is a corporate challenge designed to elevate the stature of women's leadership. And it doesn't cost anything for companies to join on. And it's not prescriptive, which has really been very helpful for a lot of companies. But basically, the Elevator Challenge is a corporate challenge designed to be a roadmap for companies to follow. And there are 6 pieces of the commitment there. One is to elevate women to senior level, to look at the retention rates for women within the company, to elevate women on the boards of those companies, to look at the wage gap internally, to look at mentoring and sponsorship programs, and to encourage women to run for political office. You know, I served in political office for 14 years, and it was the best leadership development anyone could ever have. That was certainly my experience. And we train women to run for office, and we also train women through our career development series that companies can sponsor the women in their companies to attend for 8 months, once a month, and it's been a very successful organization and programs within our organization.
Do you have a tally of how many organizations have taken the challenge?
We have almost 300
Wow.
throughout the state of Utah. So this is not just a Wasatch Front organization. This is a statewide organization. It was started by some of our key business leaders who understood the value of really changing the perception that Utah has. And there's a lot of excitement with it. Half of our board, we have a tremendous board of men and women who are recognized as business and community leaders in our state. And so I'm really proud of them, and they give a lot of great input to us, including our current governor has been on our board from day one.
You know, there's, as we talk about the need for gender diversity within organizations, I already mentioned the pandemic, and we're just learning some of the great impacts that this pandemic has had on women in the workforce and creating new barriers. There's so much that we can talk about, but I want to ask you specifically about the importance and the benefit that a company can get by specifically creating gender diversity on leadership teams, on, you mentioned boards, on executive teams. Tell us about that.
I think companies are understanding that kind of value. I'll give you one example. The University of Utah School of Dentistry, about 4 years ago, called me and said they're having difficulty recruiting female dental students. I think they only had one or two at the time. And over the course of the last 4 years, they have made an intentional effort to recruit more women in dentistry. And so this year, they have more women than men graduating from the University of Utah School of Dentistry. And as one of the male dentists said, women make great dentists because they have smaller hands and other reasons, of course. But all of the research that we have seen shows that including women, having women in senior level in leadership improves your ROI. It helps companies attract and retain talent. And it makes your employers happier, your employees and employers happier.
Are there challenges in the work that you've done since 2015? What have you seen or heard, maybe even done research on the challenges with men working with women in the workplace and vice versa, women working with men? And I think this is an important subject for us to look at so that we understand, so that we can all do better.
Yes, and we can do better. And I think companies are understanding that there's great value in having more gender diversity. There are some challenges. There's been some national research to show that men are not oftentimes understanding the new rules, whether they can go to lunch alone with a woman or how that would look, if they can compliment women on how they're dressed, if they should open a door for a woman, for instance. And so some of these are kind of internal that some men have followed and worried about, are concerned about in working with women. There are other things too. Women, on the other hand, often feel dismissed. They don't feel valued. They feel like they don't want to be a token. And I think this kind of research is really helpful for us to understand what are the barriers that we currently face. And there are many, but what we're finding is the Women's Leadership Institute has a lot of this research. We have a toolbox that we can help companies with, help them break down those barriers. And most of the time it's not intentional, but it's really important to understand some of those barriers. One thing that the Elevate Her Challenge has done well is to internally have companies that have taken the challenge bring in small groups within their own company and start a conversation from the Elevate Her Challenge. Ask their employees, where are we on these things right now? Where do we want to go? How do we want to measure them internally? And that non-prescriptive method has really worked well for companies. They're finding that it's opening doors and starting new conversations within their own company where they can set their own policies and rules. And it's been a very successful program for us.
Are there groups like this or initiatives like this that you're aware of in other states? And do you coordinate with them? Do you hear from them? Do you share best practices?
We certainly do research on best practices, and that has been a great resource for our companies that have taken the Elevate Her Challenge. We were started as a Utah organization, and so we're focusing on Utah. I do, however, receive calls from out of state asking for what we're doing and how we're doing it. There's a lot of interest in it. Many companies want to make changes. They don't know how to do it. And so one of the things I do is I spend a lot of time speaking to companies, large and small, about the value of gender diversity and how it can bring that value to companies' ROI, bottom line, make it a place where women are attracted to come.
I would imagine that one of those benefits that comes from the gender diversity is just that diversity of thought process. What does the research tell us about that?
Well, when you ask a group of people, do men and women think differently? 99% of the time they'll say yes. I mean, I think most of us understand that we do think differently. And there has been quite a bit of research, and some of it is emerging research, brain science, that is showing that there are some differences in how men and women think. A year ago, I was meeting with Dr. Jeff Anderson at the University of Utah, a neuroscientist, and he mentioned, because I asked him point blank, do men and women think differently? And he says men tend to think front to back in their brains, women side to side. So this is why women tend to be better multitaskers, for instance. And certainly not all men are alike and not all women are alike. But some of the new MRI studies are showing that there are some differences. So we need to take those complementary differences and implement them and embed them in our companies, in our homes, and understand that all kinds of diversity brings better outcomes. Gender diversity is a little bit more unique and I think offers great opportunities for our companies.
What is the future for Women's Leadership Institute in Utah? What do you like to see your organization accomplish? What's on the horizon for you?
Well, we are growing. Our footprint is really expanding in southern Utah right now. We are now formally partners with the St. George Chamber, and we're doing quite a bit of work down there. But all over the state of Utah is very interested in this because they know that the future really will rely on all kinds of different diversity, certainly gender diversity, and we need that kind of input and thinking from women for creative thinking and all of those things are important to make companies successful.
Well, I want to say how grateful we are and how much we appreciate the partnership that the Salt Lake Chamber has with the Women's Leadership Institute and with you. You mentioned earlier the gender pay gap, and that's something that you and I work on together, and we've recognized as a challenge that we need to overcome here in Utah. And it's one of the areas where there's a lot of room for improvement. So I'm grateful to be able to work with you on that and on so many other areas as well. Pat Jones, CEO of the Women's Leadership Institute, thank you for joining us on Chamber Champions.
Thank you, Derek. It's nice to work with you as well.